Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards, and in this video I have more baseball card hot takes. Baseball card hot takes, one of my favorite episodes to record. I will ask my audience, what is your hot take? And these are their responses. I'm going to say if I agree or disagree and kind of expound on that opinion. So very first one, no modern card produced after 2012 should be worth more than $500. That is a very vintage man hot take, and I like it. That is a vintage collector's view. There's no, everything's all like false scarcity. They're not actually rare. You know, back in the 1950s and 40s and 60s, all those years, those cards, they were actually more rare, you could say, for base cards. And on top of that, they graded a certain condition. So you're buying those cards. Well, now those cards have artificial scarcity where we're putting serial numbering on cards to make them valuable and autographs and relics. And I completely disagree with this hot take. Maybe you agree, but I do not think that baseball cards after 2012 should be penalized. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of cards after 2012 worth more than $500. Every single rookie card for Shohei Ohtani, Japanese and American alike, were produced after 2012. And on top of that, Aaron Judge and most of Mike Trout's career and Mookie Betts and Bobby Witt Jr. and Juan Soto and all these great players. And it's just crazy to say no card of theirs should be worth more than $500. Next up, Dave and Adams blowout and Steel City are colluding. Collusion. This is one that I need to be careful talking about. I am not going to call out Dave and Adams. I am not going to call it blowout. I'm not going to call it Steel City. But collusion in an industry that's unregulated can happen. It can happen. I'm not saying these guys are colluding. I actually would probably argue most likely not, which may be against the grain here. I think the bigger thing for these guys is they're just selling to market value, if I'm being fully transparent. So I'd be surprised if they were. There's not really a huge incentive now that do so. But either way, there is collusion in some capacity in the hobby. Think of shill bidding. Think about whatnot stuff going on. Think about people who are bidding up all of this stuff that we're seeing in the hobby. It's very easy to fake a sale. All you need to do is go have your friend. Let's say I'm going to Fanatics Premier Auction and we each have a really great Mike Trout card. Or let's say Shohei Ohtani or even Aaron Judge or Michael Jordan. You get the idea. Let's say there's a really expensive card and there's 20 copies of them. And there's two of us, me and my friend, and we each have one. And we decide I'm going to sell one on Fanatics. And what you're going to do is you're just going to buy it. We're going to lose a 20% premium. We're going to have to pay that. Let's say it goes for $100,000. So we're going to have to pay the $20,000 out of our pocket. We'll split that $10,000 each. But now our Michael Jordan card that was worth $10,000 now has a comp of $100,000. So even though we paid $10,000, it went up all this money. There's so much stuff that could happen in the sports card hobby. So with that being said, even with breaks and like faking spots and breaks and all of this stuff, or CT scanning, there's a lot of things in this hobby you need to be careful with. Fake autographs, the in-person autographs that we saw recently that's going to come out with more information about the aftermarket autographs that are all fake. So I don't know if these individuals are colluding. I'm not going to comment really on that. I don't think they are, if I'm being honest. But like the dark side of the hobby does definitely exist. Cards will return to pre-COVID prices and our collections will be worth a fraction of today's value. I don't know where we're at on the cycle of hype right now. We could be early, we could be middle, we could be late stage, and it could all be crumbling down soon. I don't think we are. I think if anything, if things do cool down, I think the floor has been raised. And I don't think we're going to go to pre-COVID prices of all prices. We are very far up from pre-COVID prices. As a collector, I would love going back to pre-COVID prices. I wouldn't even care about the values of my card shrinking if I could buy more cards of the players I like for the prices they were back in 2019. With that being said, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably more of a pipe dream, kind of like those saying how the housing market's going to crash someday or the stock market's going to crash someday, then I'll buy. It's a hard thing as time progresses and things happen. Not really a hot take, but if there's a lockout, a lot of people will leave the hobby. I love this hot take. This is a very realistic stance to take, and I think for some situations, it's absolutely spot on. If there is another lockout, we had a lockout before the last CBA, I think that was in 2021. And when that happened, we didn't miss any time. I think spring training was cut short a little bit, but there was concerns, and even the Players Association, they were split on their vote, and the players for the representatives of the teams voted for it, even though like the main players council did not vote for it. They actually voted against the CBA. Either way, there is going to be a lockout, and if it's extended at all, if we miss any games at all, it's going to paint all of these baseball players in a really bad light, and it's a really bad time to go into a lockout because baseball's popularity is way up right now, and baseball card popularity is way up right now. So for this to happen would just be really disappointing and a really big blunder that could be avoided by both of those parties if they just tried to work something out now. I'll never understand it. And maybe they are behind the scenes. But either way, I do agree with this hot take. I think people will leave the hobby temporarily and maybe even the medium term. I think this is the biggest risk to your cards, more so than the greater economy, if I'm being fully transparent. Just because the economy, things are going to happen the way they're going to happen. People like cards, but if people get burnt by the players themselves and there's no baseball, they could just go to basketball. They could go to football. They could just stop collecting. So this is a real danger, in my opinion. Juan Soto hurt his hobby value going to the Mets. I think so in the short term. I don't know about that in the long term. I think in the long term, his cards are going to be fine with the Mets. The issue we have with Juan Soto, we talk about this ad nauseum. We have the Nationals, the Padres, the Yankees, now the Mets. The thing well with the Mets is while he's not having his best year, he really is having a fantastic year. He's had a 40-30 season, shows he might get a 40-40 next year. Honestly, if he wants to go nuts this last week with how high his on basage, he might be able to get to a 40-40. But either way, the Mets are kind of choking, and that hurts his values in the short term because they may miss the playoffs entirely. Go Reds. And I live close to Cincinnati, so don't be mad at me, Mets fans. But I do think being on the Mets in the short term has hurt his cards. I think in the long term, especially if he has some big Mets moments in the playoffs, or if they win a World Series, Juan Soto's cards are going to be just as high as if he would have stayed with the Yankees and higher than if he would have stayed with the Nationals and the Padres. So I do think there is a lot of potential, but in the short term, his cards have absolutely suffered because of this decision. Topps Dynasty is not better than the other RPA sets. We have sets like Diamond Icons with rookie patch autographs, Definitives with rookie patch autographs, even like 5-star with rookie patch autographs. And in a vacuum, they are not better. I agree. I think in some ways, Definitive and Diamond Icons, or Transcendent is a big one that wasn't mentioned here. Transcendent RPAs were great this last year. They even matched for Jackson Churio as an example, one of his rookie debut images on the Transcendent RPA, which I liked, versus just the random mugshot you get on Dynasty. But in a vacuum, yes, the autographs just as equal quality. The patch is equally game worn and sometimes even better than the Dynasty patches this last year. But you're buying the Topps Dynasty brand, and typically the design of Topps Dynasty is just better than a set like Definitive. Definitive is kind of boring. Dynasty is really elegant. It looks really nice. And I do think that matters. Plus, the Topps Dynasty brand does matter. So this is something you're going to see with a lot of different sets. Like Topps Chrome Logo Fractor should be just as good as a regular Topps Chrome because they have the same number of parallels of the Gold Refractor, but the Topps Chrome has a higher multiplier because of the legacy of the product and more collectors want it. And that's what it comes down to, is more of the demand. And even though they're equal quality, Topps Dynasty is going to have the higher demand and they look a little bit better, in my opinion. The next hot take: buy modern to make money in 1 to 3 years, but don't hold them to make money in 10 years. Interesting idea. So the idea is you buy these cards more as a vessel to flip them to other collectors as regular hype cycles happen or playoff performance happens or MVP runs happen, but don't hold them too long because the current prices can't sustain the value in the long run. That's kind of my takeaway from this. And I think this is a decent approach for 99 or maybe 95% of modern active players. For players like, let's say, Byron Buxton, he's someone who's had like hype cycles, ups and downs. Javier Baez is a player who had ups and downs in his career. Chris Bryant has had ups and downs in his career. But people like Shohei Ohtani, people like Aaron Judge, people like even Mookie Betts, who some people would argue shouldn't be in that conversation, but I think is Mike Trout. Those like 4 or 5 guys up in that stratosphere, I think are going to do fine in 10 to 20 years. It's 30, 40 years. There's going to be cards from this era that are going to be sought after. I don't think people realize that. We felt similarly in the early 2000s. We felt similarly in the early 2010s that those years couldn't support an expensive card. We're seeing in basketball, they absolutely can. And we're starting to see some of those cards become very sought after in baseball. There's like Adrian Beltre 2011 Topps Finest Superfractors going for like $5,000 as an example, where nobody would have expected that back in the day. So I do think if you are looking to buy someone who's not the cream of the crop, Ohtani, Judge type player, this is accurate. But just know there are going to be cards of these players that are sought after. And I will also say there's going to be cards of someone like a Justin Verlander, who maybe isn't going to have like the biggest hobby presence in a few years, who is going to have hardcore Justin Verlander collectors who want the rare stuff, who want the Superfractors, who want the Bowman Chrome Red autographs, all of those things. Every Hall of Fame caliber player, and even some like Andrew McCutchen, who probably will make the Hall of Fame, are going to have hardcore collectors that are going to want the good stuff. So if you know what you're buying, you can cultivate a collection for the long term. But if you want to make quick money, then yeah, 1 to 3 years is a good approach. And last one, UFC collectors are now more fanatical than baseball collectors. I saw this and I said, probably. Honestly, you're probably right. Like realistically, UFC collectors, if you're collecting UFC cards, it means you're a big UFC fan. There's a lot of baseball card collectors who like baseball, but maybe don't watch baseball that much, or they collect other sports. I think if you are a specialized collector, like a Star Wars Topps Chrome collector, or a UFC collector, you are probably more of a fan of that product than someone like baseball, basketball, or football, because those are the major sports. So I agree with this hot take. I think it's an interesting hot take that makes you wonder about that. Hockey's another example. Hockey, I don't talk about nearly as much as I should. I don't know as much about hockey as I should, but those collectors of those sports that have smaller representation in cards really are true fanatics, and I like that about them. So other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my hot takes, and I'll see you in the next video.